joining me now. Nobel Prize-winning economist Paul Krugman, also distinguished professor at the Cooney Graduate Center and a New York Times columnist. He's noted for months in the Times just how strong the Biden economy is, including the piece earlier this month titled, "Dude, Where's My Recession?" Paul, thanks so much for coming back on the show. We have new GDP figures out, 2.4% annualized for the second quarter, above predictions. We're nowhere near a recession right now. The economy is in good shape, and yet Americans don't seem to believe it. There's what you've called this yawning gulf between public perception and economic reality. What do you think is behind that disconnect, that yawning gap? Is it people just not feeling the new lower inflation rate yet?
No, I think actually people are feeling it. You look at people's behavior. If you look at people traveling, people spending, they act as if they're feeling pretty okay. There's nothing about actual consumer behavior, about people's own economic decisions that suggests that they are suffering and are worried about the state of the economy. It really is, people do not perceive the economy. People perceive themselves, and then they have a narrative about the economy. And we've seen that, that's always been true to some extent, but it may be even more true now, given all the things that you were talking about. It's worth remembering that things are always changing the economy. There are always some people doing well, some people doing badly. Even when times are really good, 2 million people are laid off each month. So it's very easy for people to say, well, I'm doing well, but that's me. And I've gotten, I've the right things, and I got, I've been lucky, or I've been virtuous, or whatever. And meanwhile, I hear that there's bad stuff happening someplace else. So it's not that puzzling.
You're right to highlight the narrative, Ron. I was just seeing a survey the other day that shows parents think their local school is great, but they think schools as a whole are bad. So it's a phenomenon that exists outside of the economy. Paul, last year, economists all across the board were predicting a recession for 2023, but now it seems that those fears are being held at bay. But at the same time, the Fed keeps pushing up interest rates, 22-year high this week. People like Senator Elizabeth Warren have publicly warned that Fed Chairman Jerome Powell, a Trump appointee, lest we forget, an inflation hawk, could end up tipping the U.S. into a recession, despite all the growth and jobs gains that Biden has presided over. How worried are you about that?
I'm a little bit worried, but in a way, and one of the things that is, what is Bidenomics? And it's a bunch of stuff. But one of the things that Bidenomics that's really distinctive is these policies, the industrial policy, if you like, the promotion of manufacturing, the various things that are designed to both help the environment, make us hopefully improve our national security, spending on infrastructure. I think there's actually just a lot of strength in the economy coming out of these things, so that on the one hand, it does look as if fears of deeply entrenched inflation were way overblown. But on the other hand, the economy has been amazingly robust in the face of these interest rate hikes. So I think we're actually, in a way, I did write this recently. The Fed may have been right for the wrong reason. We may have, it may have raised rates in the face of not enduring inflation, but in the face of this Biden boom unleashed by the very specific Biden industrial policies.
Just on overblown fears of inflation, just to pick up on that, and we're now at 3%, 12 straight months of falls. Last year, former Obama and Clinton economic advisor Larry Summers, a man you know well, said that we would need either a whole year of unemployment at 10% or 5 years of unemployment at 6% in order to contain and reduce inflation. Nevertheless, here we are a year later, inflation is going down, unemployment is at a 50-year historic low. It seems that kind of prescription from Larry Summers and others was a bit more catastrophic and dire than it needed to be, was it not?
Yeah, now let me give Larry and I have known each other forever and ever, and I understand where he was coming from, and it is true that probably the underlying inflation numbers are a little bit worse than what we're seeing. There are specific things that have been going on. Gas prices were falling; they're now rising a little bit. There's crazy stuff that goes on. It's a very bizarre economy still as we recover from the pandemic, and it's probably the case that the inflation news is not quite as good as the headline number says, although it's clearly quite good. But just in general, there was a lot of extrapolation, a lot of people saying this is going to be like the 1970s all over again. And that, all along, I've said, it just doesn't look like that, right? We just never got into a situation where inflation had become so embedded in the economy that it was going to take a massive recession to end it. And sure enough, we haven't had a recession and inflation is way down.
So as we approach the 2024 election, we can see that Republicans are already running off the notion that Biden and Democrats are destroying the economy, despite the recovery that we're talking about. I can't help but be reminded, Paul, of an analogy that President Obama made back during the 2010 midterms. Have a watch.
They drove our economy into a ditch. And we got in there and put on our boots, and we pushed and we shoved, and we were sweating, and these guys were standing, watching us and sipping on a Slurpee. And then when we finally got the car up, and it's got a few dings and a few dents, it's got some mud on it, we're gonna have to do some work on it. They point to everybody and say, look what these guys did to your car.
Now, jokes aside, it's a very real analogy. Not only do Republicans cause the suffering, then stand in the way of all measures to alleviate that suffering, but even worse, they try to capitalize on that suffering and turn it into a election-winning strategy. How come Democrats don't push back more when it comes to the economy? How is it that the GOP, Paul, has managed to keep this unearned reputation for being the party that's strong and trustworthy on the economy?
Yeah, I don't fully understand it. Some of it is the media. As a lot of people have noticed, it seems to be, major media organizations, not just Fox, seem to be incapable of reporting a good economic number but fears persist about something else. There's always it's always qualified if a Democrat's in the White House. And so that's part of it. Part of it is that there is what some people call the hack gap. Among economists, Democratic-leaning economists tend to be very concerned about their professional reputations and not want to sound partisan and are always pointing out the qualifications and the shadows. And Republican-leaning economists, well, are loyalists. They echo the party line, so that there really isn't you don't have the kind of cheerleading squad from the economists. And Democratic politicians, I don't know exactly. I think there's some of the same thing there, that one party prizes loyalty above all. The other people worry a lot about their reputation for integrity and objectivity, which is a good thing on most fronts, but when it comes to public relations campaigns, can get in your way.
Very good points. We mentioned earlier that Democrats really need to get better at telling Americans how good the economy is right now. But at the same time, we also know that there are still a lot of people in the Democratic base who are suffering really badly. As we said, there are 12.5 million children still living in poverty. 37 million student loan borrowers are about to go into repayment. Americans who simply cannot pull out money in case of an emergency. With all of that in mind, how do you think, Paul, Democrats should strike a balance between touting their real economic achievements, but also acknowledging that we still have an economy that is not working for a lot of people?
Well, there are a lot of things that we can criticize in retrospect about Bill Clinton, and some things that sounded funny at the time. But I feel your pain. Being able to express empathy with people who are still having a hard time, while at the same time saying, "But we are working on making it better." So it doesn't have to always be rah-rah. A lot of it can be. That particular Obama speech, actually, Obama was not actually very good at conveying positive economic messages on average. But that particular speech was a good example. And you do need to hammer this. I mean, one of the things you sort of alluded to, but I think what's really remarkable, this is not just the best recovery from a recession that we've had in a very long time. This is, by a number of measures, this is the best job market we've had in more than 20 years. We're back. We never had a full recovery to the kind of job market that we had at the end of the Clinton years until now. But now we really do, and that needs to be sold hard.
Last question, Paul. Right now, when we hear Bidenomics, we think of all the Republicans trying to use it as a scare word and some Democrats trying to use it as a catchy PR phrase. But when you look at it more closely, and you alluded to this earlier with your talk of industrial strategy, there are people saying that Bidenomics could be pivotal in terms of American economic history. New York Magazine called it the death of neoliberalism, saying that Bidenomics is seizing an opportunity for a progressive reformation of global economic governance. In your view, Paul, Biden's economic approach, is that transforming the American economy in a way we haven't seen from previous Democratic presidents? Is it striking a blow against neoliberalism or no?
Well, yes, I mean, it really is. I mean, the idea, Biden is not a socialist. He's not a central planner, but he has been willing to be interventionist, to promote green technology, to promote high technology independence, so that, in case of possible international confrontations, basically been willing to not obsess about free markets, not obsess too much. I have slightly mixed feelings about this, but I think he's right to obsess too much about international trade rules. This is the most hands-on, laissez-faire is not the gospel administration that we've had probably since Lyndon Johnson. I mean, this is a serious break, and who would have expected? But it turns out that the most innovative guy we've had is Joe Biden.
Paul Krugman, on that note, we will leave it there. Thank you so much for your analysis, as ever.
Thanks a lot.